My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, you recently released the 20th anniversary edition of your book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us. I really want to take a deep dive into chapter one of your book, the importance of planning. When you think about personal finance, why do you believe planning matters more than tactics or products?
Planning is what makes everything personal. If you're talking about a strategy or a product, that's not personal. That is just simply, some sort of a tactic or something like that. And it might apply to you, but it also might not apply to you. So when we talk about financial planning, it's so critically important to understand that underlying, quality of life motivation that people have and really truly aligning their resources as effectively as we can with what brings them that quality of life. And without planning, how would you ever do that? If I'm just focused on taxes, or maybe I buy some, random insurance or some other type of product, I have no idea if that applies to me. There might be rules of thumb, there might be other things that I'll see on the internet, but without that, that underlying core foundation of planning, I have no idea if that's really impacting me in a positive way or not.
I get that. So you said before that planning is the most important step. Why do you think people tend to skip it?
I think it's because it's not that fun for a lot of people.
Mhm.
We think about taking a vacation or something like that, and planning a vacation for a lot of people, that's fun. I get to think about, hey, I'm going to go, to Hawaii or whatever, and now I have to think through my travel plans. Where am I going to stay? What activities am I going to do? What is it all going to cost? How am I going to spend this time? And yet at the same time, when we start to think about, let's say retirement planning, for example, that's going to affect us potentially for decades. And yet it becomes so overwhelming that we start to look at it and we go, I'm never going to get there. I don't
Mhm.
know what the next steps are. I feel completely overwhelmed. So I just don't even know where to start. And for a lot of people, that creates this sense of, maybe anxiety or stress, and they don't want to talk about it.
Mhm. So you talked about people not knowing where to start, and you suggest that people start with defining what they really want, their values. Why is that so critical?
Well, think about like a married couple, for example, because a lot of the people we help are married. You might have, first off, you have, this couple, and they might have completely different values. They might have completely different like life experiences with money. Maybe one is more of a spender type of person, another person might be more of a saver type of person. It is really important to at least have a basic understanding of where you stand in that decision making process, because if you're going to make a decision and then I just feel like I don't understand at all, you're naturally going to create some friction along the way. And if we do planning and if we get to those basic underlying values and we start to reconcile things, now it's easier to align those resources with the types of decisions that we're making. We reduce some of that friction, things start to move smoother, and everything gets a little bit easier.
So how do you uncover what people actually want versus what they think they should want? Because we see that often in meetings where they feel like they should be doing something or they should want a certain thing because, of the noise around them. How do you help them uncover what they actually want?
Yeah, sometimes it's a challenge. We'll start out a meeting and I really have to work on that front end to get them to, understand what do you really want to do? And what they'll do is they'll start to cite some of this noise. It's I read this, I saw this, my friend said this, my brother-in-law told me to do this. And I'll say, well, hold on a second. We got to back up a little bit. Like now you're getting into, or maybe they want to get into all their things. Like I have a 401k, I have this, I have this, I have this. And they almost like word vomit all of this stuff out at us. And I'm like, well, we'll get to all that stuff. But let's back up a second. What is this money for? What are you ultimately trying to accomplish? Are you trying to help your children with education, or is that just not a big priority for you? That's okay. We don't care which priority you have, but we have to understand, is this important to you? Is this not important to you? If you're going to make a housing decision, what does that look and feel like to you? And so a lot of this front end stuff, I'll ask a question. They think they're answering and they're not answering. They're deflecting. They're like moving into something else. And I'll say, whoa, hold on. Get back to my question. What is this money for? What are you actually trying to do? And in many cases, people have just never thought that way before. They don't
Mm,
think that way. They just think, well, I'm going to put, I'm going to try to max out my 401k and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I feel like I'm being responsible. And then when I ask them, well, why are you doing that? They kind of look and you can see the realization. They don't know. They just
mhm.
think it's the right thing to do. And then in many cases, we'll see people, maybe they're great savers. They might be saving too much into their retirement plan. And they're
Mhm.
not doing things that bring them quality of life today. And they feel like they can't because they just don't have enough resources. We'll tell them to reduce their 401k contributions, maybe for a short period of time, to do the other thing that's important to them. And they'll immediately, like, it's almost like a look of shock. I can't believe you're telling me to reduce my 401k. That's not what I read. I should be maxing this out. These are a lot of the things that we have to deal with to try to get people to align their resources, as best they can.
And I think some of that is because of the societal norms of today and how financial success is defined. So, how does quality of life differ from traditional ideas of financial success?
Well, we're bombarded every day with all sorts of marketing messages. You can look at advertising over the years and see that they try to position this perspective in everyone's head. And we naturally take in all of those messages every single day. And you will get a sense of, hey, that person lives in a big fancy house. They must be doing really well. Now, in reality, if you dug into the underlying, numbers or their situation, maybe they have massive amounts of debt and they're just living way beyond their means. So seeing the outside visible picture is not necessarily a representation of how they're really doing. But we immediately take that in and go, well, their house is nicer than my house. They must be doing better than me. There was a very popular book from a long time ago called The Millionaire Next Door, and a part of that book was talking about how so often the millionaire next door is unidentifiable from the outside. You look at them, maybe they drive a very modest car, maybe they live in a very modest home, but they're completely debt free, they're saving lots of money, they have a lot of security. And so you can't always trust what you see or hear out in the world, and you also can't apply what you see out in the world to your own situation.
I completely agree with that. In the book, you provide an example about someone winning the lottery, and people think, oh, winning the lottery would solve all their problems. Why does it often do the opposite?
Well, it, there's a lot of reasons, by the way. I mean, it's different for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for people who have never had a lot of money, they're usually operating from like a scarcity mentality. And in many cases, when they have money, culturally, they spend it. Like
Mhm.
that's just like, I get money, I spend it. I get money, I spend it. And they now get this big chunk of money and they go, okay, well, now I can buy the fancy house, I can buy the fancy car, I can give money to my family, I can do all these things. And I have so much money that I have no concept of really like how long this might last or what I can do with it or whatever. And so in the book, I describe the example of how they start to do these things. And the first thing they rarely account for are taxes. I mean,
Hmm.
we see this with people who get big bonuses and things like that. My daughter just got her first job and she had no concept of taxes, especially
Mm,
payroll taxes. And I'm like, you're not making this much, you're making this much. This is
hmm.
what you get to spend. And yet, a lot of people see this number and they go, oh, I'm doing really well, whether that's a lottery, whether that's their paycheck, whether that's a bonus. And now they spend off of this. Then when tax time comes and they go, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Now maybe they found that they overspent. Maybe they owe money on their taxes or whatever it happens to be, and they don't have the money left to be able to do that. Now they start going into debt in order to be able to catch up. And then it creates this, vicious spiral kind of down this, spiral of doom financially speaking. So even though they had a lot of resources, they didn't align those resources with what was actually important to them, and now they end up in a problem.
So, on that same line of thought, how should someone think about a bonus differently if they already have a financial plan in place?
Well, realistically, something like a lottery win or a bonus or maybe a big raise, you have a job change and you get a big raise. What you typically want to do is think in terms of you've already got your core expenses in place. You were already living, hopefully well, but you were already living on this in order to avoid having that lifestyle creep, which is kind of a natural human nature type of thing. That's where the planning comes in. Like, I already do this. Now,
Mhm.
the extra, I should imagine what can I do to improve quality of life with this extra? Maybe that's some travel. Maybe that's buying something that's important to me. Maybe it's home remodeling. But it also might be increasing my savings. So you
Mhm.
don't automatically just take this money, inject it into your expenses, and say, well, now instead of going to Starbucks once a week, I'm going to go to Starbucks every day. I can afford to do that. But that Starbucks probably didn't enhance your quality of life a whole lot. You were already doing that thing. So it's
Right.
a time of reflection to really think in terms of what is this money for? And then now I intentionally look at that and how do I apply it?
Yeah, so it is all about having the right perspective. And when we talk about perspective, you said money isn't evil, it's just a tool. Why is that distinction so important?
Well, we have a tendency to think in like black and white, either or, good, bad types of approaches. And so a lot of times when somebody sees a situation where money didn't benefit somebody, maybe they ended up with a drug problem or a gambling addiction or something, and the money, you'll see this with famous sports athletes or movie stars or whatever, and they make all this money, and then all of a sudden their life ends up spiraling out of control, and they end up with some sort of a problem. And then the conclusion is, well, money was bad. And it's
Mm,
like, well, no, money wasn't bad.
hmm.
Money's just a tool. How they used the tool led to a poor outcome. And investments are the same way. Investments aren't inherently good or bad or right or wrong. Investments are tools to help you accomplish goals. So the key is establish the goals. Now you align the tools with how it actually works. And money is the same way.
Got it. So you make reference to Susie Orman's idea of people, money, things. Why does that matter?
Because people, money, things, there's a lot of things I disagree with Susie Orman on, but
Mhm.
one of the basic things is when you start talking about, people, money, things, you're prioritizing that people, relationships, things that are people that are important to you, those are your core values. That those are people that mean something to you. And then you start working your way down, like things should not be your primary driving motivation. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have nice things. I mean, but
Mhm.
you always want to think in terms of what is the most important to you to begin with from your perspective and then work your way down. A lot of men, for example, we tend to value things. Things create like a status for us. I have a nicer
Mhm.
boat than you do. I have a nicer car than you do. It's like a competitive nature. And so many men over time, if they're very financially successful, you'll see them waste a lot of those resources on things that ultimately they were just seeking more and more and more and more. And then it felt very unfulfilling to them because it wasn't aligned with any core principles or values.
So when we talk about the values, then how often should someone revisit their definition of quality of life? Do you think that's something that should remain consistent because that's something that's inherited to you, or do you think that should be something that should be revisited?
A lot of times the primary revisit is when you've experienced a major life change.
Okay.
I had children. Well, for
Mhm.
anybody that's had children, you know that that was a major life event that probably shifted your values and priorities at least a little bit.
Mhm.
If I move, so now I've gone from, one city to another city or in one state to another state, that might be a great time to look at things like that. Retirement, as you start to get close to that major life phase type of thing. Getting married is absolutely a time where you should be carefully evaluating how are my values compared to my spouse. And so life changes are a very primary time. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't change your values or priorities along the way without a major life change, but it's probably a slow process. So, a
Mhm.
lot of financial advisors talk about reviewing things quarterly or semi annually or annually. It's on some sort of a calendar. And we look at that and we go, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, our clients are not changing things quarterly. Like their goals and values didn't change quarterly. Now there might be a quarter where something happened because of a life change, but that's just not the way things operate. And the reason people have that model is it came from reviewing investments. Hey, we
Mhm.
just looked at your investments. You either went up or you went down. Here's a new thing I think I'm going to sell you as compared to an old thing. And it was like a sales cycle. It was on my terms, not your terms.
Mhm.
All of your conversations, all of your goals, all of your actions should be based on your terms, not your financial advisors.
Got it. So we do live in a world where we're kind of pressured to fit into this one size fits all mentality. And when it comes to financial planning, you said there's no single right way to create a financial plan. So what is the danger of copying someone else's financial strategy?
We talk a lot about the human nature of hurting.
Mm,
Herding came from evolution to kind of help human beings come together as a group, and they found safety in the herd. And so we were taught over a long period of time that the consensus view of the herd was kind of the safe view, or this is the way that I should operate. And if I step outside of the herd, now I have the risk of being accountable for my decisions. So with financial planning, if my friends and family talk one way and then I do something else. So I'm going to use the example of Social Security, for example. People come
mhm,
in and they'll say, well, my friends and family say I should take it as early as I possibly can because I'm not sure how long I'm going to live, and I'm going to get more money by taking it as early as I can, and plus the program might go broke and I don't know how long I'm going to get it, so I'm just going to take it as soon as possible. And then we start to go, well, here are reasons why you might not want to do that. And now they listen to us. They go, that makes sense. They wait on their Social Security, and then the next time they come back, they go, can we have that conversation about Social Security again? Because my friends and family are telling me that I'm crazy for waiting to collect benefits, and I feel like I'm doing something wrong because they've stepped outside of the herd. They feel like the
mhm.
consensus view must be the right view, and it's hard for them even to accept our advice in that setting.
And I think sometimes there may be fear involved as well. So, what do you say to the person who's afraid to start financial planning because they're worried about making a mistake?
Fear, this is a very strong motivator throughout our lives. Taking risks, a lot of people are very risk averse. So they're not going to start that new business, take that new job, take the leap of really committing to something. So fear is a strong motivator. And when we talk about financial planning, so many people come to us and they say, well, I don't have enough money. I don't, you can't help me yet. I'm not wealthy yet. And we look at that and we go, let's have that conversation. This is the power of our group advisory agreements is we can help people who aren't already wealthy. And by taking that step, it might be a very difficult step, But by taking an action, a positive action in some direction, it's incredibly empowering for us to overcome our fear. It's action that allows us to overcome our fear. That doesn't mean the
Mhm.
action is easy. It means that the action starts to breed the ability to have comfort with the fear. I acknowledge that taking this step is something that worries me. Maybe it gives me stress, whatever. Again, that outside perspective of a good financial planner is to help reduce that fear, not eliminate it. It's to help reduce that fear in order for you to be able to take a positive action.
Yes. And then once you take an action, it's important to remember that life is dynamic. So can you talk about why flexibility is such an important part of successful planning?
Yeah, a lot of times we're taught that, okay, this is the action. I took it. Now I'm done. And, max out your 401k. You just always max out your 401k. And then, you're taught that that's the right thing to do. When we talk about a dynamic process, life ebbs and flows. And there's times where, you might need more resources today in order to maintain quality of life. Somebody might lose their job for a period of time. Now they start to access those emergency reserves that they work so hard to save. And it's very, very hard for them to dig into the money that they saved for fear that, am I going to run out? Am I going to end up, without a home or, whatever? And so when you shift from one mindset to another mindset, that's what escalates that fear in many cases. So we always have to evaluate, where am I right now? Am I in a strong position? Am I in a weak position? Have I dug a hole for myself and now I need to fill that hole back in before I start thinking about investing or any of those things? And that's where we get into our hierarchy of money as far as understanding that hierarchy of cash flow to make decisions that are alignment with what's important to us.
So as we close out, if someone watching this hasn't done any planning yet, what's the one step that they should take today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it kind of depends on your situation. If you are married, you absolutely should sit down and have a conversation with your spouse about, how do you feel about, money and where are we at and how are you feeling about things? And then, hey, why don't we go see somebody and have a conversation about this? If you're single, it might be as simple as just sitting down sometime and going through your expenses and going, well, where does my money actually go? For
Mm,
some people, they're just completely shocked that I find that going out to eat, I'm spending $800 a month. And I felt like I really wasn't going out to eat that much. But all of a sudden, you just realize how much it adds up. Accountability is a really, really big thing that's been missing from society here for a while, where we're, we tend to be taught that like we should feel good about ourselves regardless of where we're at.
mm.
I made a poor decision. I'm going down a bad path, but that's okay. Like that's okay. And it's like, well, okay, let's at least acknowledge we're going down a bad path. Let's
Mhm.
try to shift that path and start to move in a more positive direction. That's personal accountability and starting to take intentional actions towards, positive results.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I do agree that it is important to have that personal accountability. That's how change begins. So, thank you so much for sharing that. And until next time, have a great one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.